In the heart of Udeni, an Igbo village surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills, flowed the sacred river Orji. This river was not just any waterway, it was believed to be the home of a powerful mermaid, Mmụọ Nneka, who was revered by the villagers. For generations, the women of Udene had come to this river to ask for the blessing of children. Mmụọ Nneka, known for her benevolence, granted the wishes of barren women who came to her with pure hearts. In return, these women would sweep the river bank, keeping it pristine as a sign of their gratitude. The women of Udeni took pride in their role as caretakers of the sacred river. Every morning, they would gather at the water's edge with their brooms made of palm fronds, singing songs of praise to Mmụọ Nneka as they swept away the fallen leaves and debris. The river was always clean, its waters sparkling in the sunlight, and the mermaid was always happy. In return, the village was blessed with healthy children, and the women were revered for their role in this sacred ritual. However, not everyone in Udene village was pleased with the mermaid's generosity. A man named Obinna, who was known for his jealousy and bitterness, harbored a deep resentment toward the women. He could not understand why the mermaid would favor the women, granting them the one thing they desired most. He believed that the women were becoming too powerful, too influential, and this threatened his sense of control. One day, Obinna gathered a group of like-minded men from the village. They conspired to put an end to the women's rituals. They agreed that no woman was to sweep the river bank again, and any wife who disobeyed her husband would face severe punishment. The men believed that by stopping the women from cleaning the river, they could diminish the mermaid's power and restore what they saw as the proper order of things. Despite the men's degree, there was one woman who could not be swayed. Her name was Ada Ugo, a woman who had suffered the pain of childlessness for many years. She had visited the river countless times, offering her prayers to Mmụọ Nneka, but her womb had remained barren. Desperate, she went to the river one night under the cover of darkness and poured out her heart to the mermaid. "Mmụọ Nneka," Adugo cried, her voice trembling with emotion. "If you grant me the blessing of a child, no, 2 children, I will dedicate my life to keeping your river clean. I will sweep the bank every day, no matter what." Moved by Adugo's sincerity, the mermaid appeared before her in a shimmering form. "Your wish shall be granted, Adugo," Mmụọ Nneka said, her voice like the gentle flow of the river. "But remember, our pact must be honored." Soon after, Adugo discovered she was with child, not just one, but a set of twins. She was overjoyed and began fulfilling her promise to the mermaid. Every morning, she would sneak to the river and sweep the bank, singing songs of gratitude. But her actions did not go unnoticed. The other men in the village led by Obinna, became furious. They saw Adugo's defiance as a challenge to their authority. One fateful morning, as Adugo was sweeping the river bank, the men stormed down to the river. Obinna, in his rage, ordered them to beat her. The men, driven by their jealousy and anger, attacked Adugo, leaving her battered and broken by the water's edge. As her blood mingled with the river, the waters turned dark and a fierce wind began to blow. Mmụọ Nneka, enraged by the men's cruelty, rose from the depths of the river. Her once gentle features were now twisted with anger. "You dare to harm the one who honors me," she thundered, her voice echoing across the village. "For your wickedness you shall pay a heavy price." With a wave of her hand, Mmụọ Nneka cast a powerful curse upon the men of Udene. From that day on, they found themselves stripped of their manhood, their strength and pride taken from them in an instant. The village was plunged into chaos as the men realized the gravity of what they had done. The women of Udene, shocked by what had happened, gathered at the river to plead with Mmụọ Nneka, but the mermaid was not easily appeased. "Your men must learn the errors of their ways," she declared. "Only when they have truly repented will the curse be lifted." And so the village of Udene was left to grapple with the consequences of the men's actions. The once harmonious relationship between the villagers and the sacred river was shattered, and the path to redemption would be long and difficult. As the days turned into weeks, Udeni village was enveloped in an atmosphere of dread and uncertainty. The men, once proud and dominant, now walked with their heads bowed in shame. Their strength, both physical and spiritual, has been stripped away, leaving them mere shadows of their former selves. The women, who had once looked to their husbands for guidance and protection, were now faced with the grim reality that they were on their own. Adugo, despite her injuries, recovered slowly. She was determined to honor her part with Mmụọ Nneka, and though the other women feared for her safety, they began to join her at the river bank once more. They understood that their connection to the sacred river was vital, not just for their own well-being, but for the entire village. Under the cover of night, the women gathered, their brooms in hand, and began to sweep the river bank they had done for generations. Their songs, once filled with joy, were now tinged with sorrow, but they sang nevertheless, hoping that their devotion would somehow appease the angry mermaid. Mmụọ Nneka watched from the depths of the river, her anger slowly giving way to a sense of compassion. She saw the fear in the women's eyes, the desperation in their hearts, and she knew that the village could not survive without her blessing. But the men had committed a grave sin, and their punishment was not easily undone. Obinna, the instigator of the violence, had become a pariah in his own village. He could no longer look anyone in the eye, for he knew that it was his jealousy and hatred that had brought this curse upon Udeni. He spent his days wandering the outskirts of the village, haunted by the sound of Adugo's cries and the angry voice of Mmụọ Nneka. One night, as Obinna sat by the river bank, alone and filled with regret, he heard a soft voice calling his name. He looked up and saw Mmụọ Nneka emerging from the water. Her eyes fixed on him with a mixture of anger and pity. "We have brought great suffering to your people," Monica said, her voice calm but stern. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Obinna fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I was wrong, Monica," he sobbed. "My jealousy and pride led me astray. I beg you please, leave this curse from us. I will do anything to make things right." The mermaid gazed at Obinna for a very long moment, her expression unreadable. "Your words are heavy, but your actions have been even heavier," she finally said. "If you truly wish to make amends, you must prove your repentance through deeds, not words." Obinna nodded eagerly. "I will do whatever it takes," he promised. "Just tell me what I must do." Nneka considered his plea, and then spoke in a voice that was both commanding and gentle. "You will gather all the men of the village and bring them to the river bank at dawn. There you will lead them in a ritual of purification and atonement. Only then will I consider lifting the curse." Obinna agreed, and with Nneka's words echoing in his mind, he returned to the village. He spent the night going from house to house, speaking to the men who had once followed him in his misguided crusade. He told them of his encounter with the mermaid and the chance of redemption she had offered. At first, the men were hesitant. They had grown accustomed to their new reality, resigned to their fate. But as Obinna spoke, his sincerity and desperation began to sway them. By the time the first light of dawn broke over the village, every man had gathered at the river bank, ready to atone for their sins. The women of the village, curious and hopeful, watched from a distance as Obinna led the men in the ritual. They chanted prayers of forgiveness, offered sacrifices to the river, and begged Nneka for her mercy. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the waters of the river began to glow with a soft golden light. Nneka appeared once more, her presence filling the air with a sense of calm. She looked at the men, who were now kneeling at the water edge, their faces edged with remorse. "Your repentance is sincere," she said, her voice carrying across the river, "but the path to forgiveness is long. You will regain what you have lost, but only if you commit yourself to a life of humility, respect, and service to others. The women of this village have shown strength and courage where you have shown weakness. It is time for you to learn from them." With those words, the mermaid slowly disappeared beneath the water, leaving the men to reflect on her message. The curse was not fully lifted, but a small sense of hope began to stir in the hearts of the villagers. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they were determined to walk it together, united in their quest for redemption. And so the village of Udeni began a new chapter in its history, one where the bonds between its people were tested and strengthened, and where the lessons of humility and respect would guide them for generations to come. But the full restoration of balance in Udeni was still a long way off, and the trials they faced were far from over. The villagers of Udeni rallied behind Obinna, understanding that his journey toward redemption was in many ways a journey for them all. The dark cloud that lingered over their village was a reminder that their fate was intertwined, and that true peace could only come when every heart was free from the shadows of the past. Obinna, though humbled by the support of his fellow villagers, was burdened by the weight of his task. He knew that the road ahead would require him to confront the darkest parts of himself, the anger and resentment that had led him to challenge the Mermaid's blessings and disrupt the harmony of Udeni. Under Adugo's guidance, the village elders convened to discuss the next steps. They decided that Obinna would undergo a series of rituals designed to cleanse his spirit and guide him toward a deeper understanding of his actions. These rituals were ancient, passed down through generations, and were believed to have the power to heal even the most troubled soul. The first ritual was the Ofufe, a ceremony of confession and absolution. In the presence of the entire village, Obinna was required to speak openly about his feelings of jealousy and hatred, acknowledging the harm he had caused. It was a difficult and painful process, but the act of verbalizing his sins was the first step towards freeing himself from their grip. The villagers gathered at the village square as the ceremony began. A large bonfire was lit, its flames reaching high into the night sky. The elders, dressed in traditional garb adorned with symbols of purification, led Obinna to the center of the square. There, he knelt before the fire, the heat of the flames a reminder of the cleansing he sought. Obinna's voice trembled as he began to speak. "I was consumed by jealousy," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I envied the power the women had, the blessings they received from Mmụọ. I thought that by disrupting their rituals, I could reclaim what I felt was mine by right. But I was wrong, so terribly wrong." As he spoke, the villagers listened in silence, their faces a mixture of sorrow and understanding. They knew that Obinna's pain was not his alone. It was a reflection of the deeper wounds that existed within the village. The elders nodded approvingly as Obinna continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I harmed those who trusted me," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I led others astray, and I brought a curse upon us all. For this, I am deeply sorry. I seek forgiveness, not just from Mmụọ, but from each and every one of you." When he had finished, the elders approached him, one by one, placing their hands on his shoulders in a gesture of solidarity. The villagers followed suit, each person offering words of encouragement and support. This act of communal forgiveness was powerful, a tangible reminder that Obinna was not alone in his quest for redemption. With the Ofufe ceremony complete, Obinna was ready for the next phase of his journey. The elders instructed him to spend 7 days in solitude at the edge of the sacred forest known as Ajo Mkpuru, where he would meditate on his past and seek guidance from the spirit of the ancestors. This period of isolation was meant to cleanse his mind and soul, allowing him to confront the deepest part of himself without distraction. The villagers prepared Obinna for his time in the forest, giving him food, water, and a small carving of the village's ancestral spirit, Eziokwu, which represented truth and clarity. As he made his way to the forest edge, the villagers watched with bated breath, their hopes and prayers accompanying him. The forest was a place of mystery and power, where the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds was said to be the thin. Obinna felt a mixture of fear and anticipation as he entered the dense canopy of trees. The air was thick with the scent of earth and moss, and the sound of the forest birds calling, leaf rustling, incense buzzing, created a symphony that seemed to speak directly to his soul. For the first few days, Obinna struggled with the silence and solitude. His thoughts were filled with memories of his past, the mistake he had made, and the harm he had caused. But as time passed, the forest began to work its magic. The rhymes of the natural world lulled him into a state of deep reflection, and slowly he began to see his actions in a new light. One night, as Obinna sat by a small fire, he was visited by the spirit of an ancestor, an ancient figure known as Nze. The spirit appeared as a shimmering figure in the darkness, his eyes glowing with wisdom. Nze spoke to Obinna in a voice that was both gentle and commanding. "You have come far, Obinna," the spirit said, "but your journey is not yet complete. The darkness with you is rooted in fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being forgotten. You must confront these fears and understand that true strength lies not in power over others, but in the power of uplift and support them." Obinna listened intently, his heart pounding in his chest. "How do I do this, Nze?" he asked, his voice trembling. "How do I let go of the fear that has ruled my life for so long?" Nze's eyes softened. "You must embrace the light within you, Obinna. You must learn to trust in the goodness of others, to see their strength as a complement to your own. The path of redemption is not walked alone. It is a journey shared with those who care for you. When you return to the village, do so with an open heart, ready to accept the love and support of your community." With those words, the spirit faded into the night, leaving Obinna to contemplate the wisdom he had been given. The following morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the forest, Obinna felt a sense of peace that he had not known in years. He knew that his time in the forest has changed, and that he was ready to return to Udeni with a renewed spirit. When Obinna emerged from the forest on the seventh day, the villagers greeted him with open arms. They could see the change in him, the light in his eyes, the calmness in his demeanor. Adugo, who had led the village in his absence, smiled as he approached him. "Welcome back, Obinna," she said warmly. "You have done well." Obinna nodded, his heart full of gratitude. "Thank you, Adugo. I could not have done it without the support of the village." As the villagers gathered around him, Obinna knew that his journey was far from over. The path to redemption was ongoing, and there were still many challenges to face. But with the love and support of his community, he was ready to continue the work of healing the wounds that had been inflicted on Udeni. The curse that had befallen the village was beginning to lift, but there were still trials ahead. The village was on a path towards restoration, but the full balance had yet to be restored. And so, with renewed determination, the villagers of Udeni prepared themselves for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together they could overcome anything.